I want to tell you about the letter before I tell you about the pension, because the letter is where the story begins, in the way that matters, not at the beginning of the 38 years, but at the point where the 38 years met the rule that neither I nor anyone at the company had mentioned in the decade of conversations I had about my retirement planning. I want to describe the specific quality of receiving the letter, because the quality is instructive. I am a quality systems manager. I receive documents. I have been processing documents that report gaps between expectation and reality for 38 years, and the cognitive experience of receiving such a document is, for me, the cognitive experience of encountering a quality failure. The process has not produced the expected output. The gap is documentable, the cause is traceable, and the resolution is a matter of determining who is responsible for the gap and how the gap is addressed. I read the letter. I processed the gap. I traced the cause to the November 2020 meeting and the missing qualification of the CPI uprating provision. I determined that the gap was addressable through the dispute process. I filed the dispute. These were the correct sequential steps. What was different from a professional quality failure was the specific personal cost of the gap, which is not a category that exists in quality systems management. A quality failure has a cost per unit calculation. A pension reduction has a cost per year of remaining life calculation, and the remaining life calculation is personal, in a way that the cost per unit calculation is not, and I made it, and it produced the 5-year number I described, and the 5-year number is what the smaller life is organized around. I want to tell you about the letter before I tell you about the pension, because the letter is where the story begins in the way that matters. The letter arrived in March 2022, 4 months after I had moved to Hua Hin. It was from the pension administrator of the automotive supplier where I had worked since 1984. The letter informed me that as a recipient of the company pension who had established permanent residence outside the European Union, I was subject to the international payment provisions of the pension scheme, which differed from the domestic provisions in 2 specific ways. First, the annual consumer price index uprating that applied to domestic recipients would not apply to my payments, meaning the nominal pension amount would remain fixed at the point of my retirement and would not increase to reflect inflation. And second, a withholding tax provision applicable to non-EU recipients would reduce the gross pension amount by 11% before payment. I had not been told about either of these provisions before I retired. I had been told by the company's pension advisor in the meeting I attended in November 2020, as part of my pre-retirement planning, that my pension would be a specific amount and that it would increase annually with the CPI index. I had planned my retirement on that information. The information was accurate for a man who retired and remained in Germany. It was not accurate for a man who retired and moved to Thailand. My name is Martin. I am 67 years old. I am from Hamburg, and I spent 38 years working for a company that makes precision components for the German automotive industry. I am not going to name the company because the company has been professional in handling the subsequent dispute and because the dispute is not the story. The story is about a man who spent 38 years building a life on the assumption that institutional reliability was a feature of the institutions he had chosen, and who discovered, at 65, that reliability has terms and conditions, and that the terms and conditions matter most when you are outside the territory in which they were written. I want to say something about what it meant, at 65, to encounter an institutional failure for the first time, because the first-time quality of it matters. A quality systems manager who has spent 38 years identifying and resolving process failures has developed a specific professional equanimity about failures. Failures occur, failures are traceable, failures are addressable. The goal is to identify and close the gap. I applied this professional equanimity to the pension clause, and it held. What was different from a professional failure was the accumulation of the failure against the context of the father and the dockyard and the 38 years. My father's institutional relationship had rewarded his trust completely, and I had built my life on the expectation that mine would also, and the expectation was correct in the territory where it was formed and incorrect outside it, and the geography of the incorrectness is the specific thing that the professional equanimity does not fully absorb. I processed it, I continue to process it. The processing produces, at intervals, not bitterness but a specific quality of awareness. Institutions are reliable within their terms, and the terms have geography, and the geography requires investigation before you change your geography. This is the lesson. I have it. The smaller life is built on it. I should give you the 38 years, because the 38 years are the context, and without the context, the letter and the pension and the Hua Hin apartment are just numbers and a place name. Let me give you the specific quality of the 38 years, because company man is a phrase that means different things, and I want to be accurate about what it means in this case. I was not a company man in the sense of a man who was defined by the company or whose identity was subsumed by it. I was a company man in the sense of a man who entered an institution that was a serious institution operating in a serious industry, and who took that seriousness as a given and built his professional life around it, and who found across 38 years that the seriousness was real and that the institution was what it appeared to be, and who came to understand that this was not a common experience and who valued it accordingly. The automotive precision component industry is not a glamorous industry. Quality systems management within it is the practice of ensuring that the components meet the specifications that the automotive manufacturers require. And the specifications are demanding because automotive components must perform within tolerances that allow for no meaningful error across the lifetime of the vehicle. And the vehicles are used in conditions that the specifications do not fully anticipate. And the quality manager's job is to close the gap between the specifications and the conditions by catching errors before they reach the final product. I was very good at this. The company knew I was very good at this. The relationship between the company and me across 38 years was the relationship between an institution that needed precision and a person who provided it. And the institution compensated the provision with the pension and the record and the 38 years of professional life that I valued and that I value still. I should give you the 38 years, because the 38 years are the context, and without the context, the letter and the pension and the Hua Hin apartment are just numbers and a place name. I joined the company in July 1984, at 24, as a quality control technician in the Hamburg facility. I had completed an engineering apprenticeship and a further qualification in precision measurement, and the company offered the specific combination of technical work, institutional stability, and the German employee benefit structure that a 24-year-old from a working-class Hamburg family, who had watched his father work 30 years in the same dockyard, found persuasive. I want to tell you about the father and the dockyard, because the father and the dockyard are the source of the specific value I placed on institutional reliability, and the value I placed on institutional reliability is the reason the pension clause was particularly difficult to process. My father worked at the Blohm plus Voss shipyard in Hamburg from 1956 to 1986. 30 years. He built ships. He was reliable, and the shipyard was reliable. And the arrangement between them was the arrangement that defined his working life, which was, you apply your skills with full commitment, and the institution provides the structure within which the skills can be applied, and the structure includes a pension that will support the retirement. He received his pension, he trusted the institution, and the institution rewarded the trust. I understood from watching my father's relationship with his institution that this was how institutions were supposed to work. And I chose my institution based on what I understood about how institutions were supposed to work. And the institution I chose worked as supposed for 38 years. And then the pension clause revealed that supposed to work has a geographic boundary, and the geographic boundary was the EU, and I was outside it. I joined the company in July 1984, at 24, as a quality control technician in the Hamburg facility. The persuasion was correct. The company was everything it appeared to be. I rose through the technical grades over the first 10 years, moved into quality systems management, became the senior quality manager for the Hamburg facility in 1999, and remained in that role for the following 23 years. The work was not glamorous. Quality management in precision component manufacturing is the work of preventing errors rather than creating things, and the preventing of errors is a form of professional accomplishment that the people who commission the components find invisible when it is working, and visible only when it is not. But it was technically demanding, and it was done correctly, and the company knew this, and compensated me accordingly. And across 38 years I built what I expected to build, which was a pension and a record, and the specific satisfaction of a job maintained at the highest standard for the full duration. The retirement plan was developed across 3 years before I left, from 2019 to 2022. I attended the pension planning sessions that the company offered. I spoke with the pension advisor. I received the projected pension figure. I want to give you the November 2020 meeting more precisely, because the meeting is the hinge of the story, in the way that a quality failure is always traced back to a specific point in the process, where the error was introduced, and the November 2020 meeting is that point. The pension advisor was a woman named Frau Kessler, who had been the company's pension coordination officer for 11 years, and who was, by any professional standard, competent. She showed me the projected pension figure, a specific monthly amount that I am going to describe as adequate for the retirement I was planning, and leave the specific number out of, because the specific number is mine and not required for the lesson. She walked me through the CPI uprating mechanism. The pension would increase each year by the Consumer Price Index for Germany, which had historically been between 1 and 2% per year, and which at the time of the meeting was approximately 1.5%. She showed me the 10-year projection at various inflation assumptions. I took notes. I asked questions about the bridge pension, the temporary additional payment available to recipients who retired before the state pension age, and about the payment schedule, and about the tax treatment of the pension in Germany. I asked about the tax treatment of the pension in Thailand. Frau Kessler referred me to a tax advisor for that question, which was the correct referral. What neither Frau Kessler nor I asked, because neither of us had yet arrived at the question, was, what is the pension figure for a recipient living outside the European Union? The question was available. The answer would have changed the number. The number would have changed the plan. Nobody asked. The retirement plan was developed across 3 years before I left, from 2019 to 2022. I ran the numbers against my expected costs. And here I need to describe how I expected to live in Thailand, because the expected costs are where the planning began to diverge from the reality, and the divergence was not only the pension clause. I had researched Hua Hin specifically, and had found it in various expat publications and forums to be a town of approximately 100,000 people on the Gulf of Thailand south of Bangkok, with a specific character: quiet, residential, a significant population of long-stay foreign retirees, good medical infrastructure, reasonable cost of living. That suited a 65-year-old quality systems manager from Hamburg who had spent 38 years in a precision manufacturing environment and who wanted, at the end of those years, something that had the same qualities in a different register: quiet, well-maintained, reliable, without drama. Hua Hin was the correct choice on these criteria and remained so. What I had calculated as the cost of living in Hua Hin was based on the pension figure the company advisor had given me. The pension figure the company advisor had given me was the domestic figure. The international figure was 11% lower at the point of retirement and diminishing further each year as the CPI uprating that domestic recipients received was not applied to my payment. The gap between the planned figure and the actual figure, in the first year, was approximately €400 per month. €400 per month is not a catastrophic difference for a man with a savings pool to absorb it. I had a savings pool, the proceeds of the sale of the Hamburg apartment in 2021, which had entered the Hamburg property market in 2014 at the exact moment before the Hamburg property market began its decade-long appreciation, and which produced a sum I am going to describe as sufficient and leave at that. And I had used a portion of that pool to fund the Hua Hin apartment deposit and the relocation costs and the establishment costs of the first 6 months, and the remaining pool was sufficient to cover the €400 monthly shortfall for approximately 7 years at current spending levels. I want to give you why Thailand specifically, because the choice of Thailand requires some explanation from a 65-year-old German quality systems manager who had spent his professional life in the precision manufacturing culture of northern Germany. The explanation is not exotic. I had visited Thailand twice before retiring. Once in 2017 with my then partner, who has since moved on to her own retirement arrangement, and once in 2019 alone, to Hua Hin specifically, for 2 weeks as a deliberate test of the hypothesis that the city was the correct retirement location. The 2019 visit confirmed the hypothesis. What the hypothesis was, I needed warmth, not for the holidays, but for the daily life. I needed a cost of living that allowed the pension to be sufficient without requiring supplemental income. I needed a healthcare infrastructure that was professional and accessible. And I needed a city that was quiet, in the specific way of a place that is lived in by people with established lives, rather than visited by people with temporary agendas. Hua Hin was these things in 2019. Hua Hin is these things in 2024. The hypothesis was correct. The number was wrong. I had a savings pool, the proceeds of the sale of the Hamburg apartment in 2021, and I had used a portion of that pool to fund the Hua Hin apartment deposit and the relocation costs and the establishment costs of the first 6 months, and the remaining pool was sufficient to cover the €400 monthly shortfall for approximately 7 years at current spending levels. 7 years was long enough, I calculated, for the dispute with the pension administrator to resolve. The dispute. I want to describe the dispute with the specific accuracy it requires, because the dispute is the middle section of this story, and the middle section is where the lesson is. I want to add something about what the dispute process revealed, because the process produced information beyond the determination, and the information is relevant. In the course of the dispute, the pension law specialist I engaged reviewed not only the November 2020 meeting notes but also the general communication between the company and its pension recipients about international payment provisions. What he found was, the information about overseas recipient provisions had been included in the pension scheme document since 2009, when the scheme was modified in response to an EU directive on portable pensions. The modification had been communicated to all pension scheme members at the time of the change, in a letter that was sent to the home address of all members. In 2009, I had been living at a specific Hamburg address, and the letter had been sent there, and I had received it. I had it. It was in the file I kept for employment documentation, in a filing cabinet in a storage unit in Hamburg. My daughter retrieved it in 2022. It was an 8-page document with a summary letter, and the summary letter mentioned the international recipient provisions in the 4th paragraph, and I have read that 4th paragraph approximately 15 times since 2022, and I can confirm that it is accurate and clear, and that in 2009 I had read the summary letter and noted the relevant change for domestic recipients, and not noted the international recipient provisions, because they were, in 2009, not relevant to me, and I had filed the document and not returned to it. 13 years later, the international recipient provisions were relevant to me, and I did not have the recollection of the 2009 letter, and I had not reread it before retiring. This is the specific quality of the failure. The information was sent, it was received, it was filed correctly, and it was not retrieved at the moment it became relevant. Because the moment of retirement is not the moment when a man goes to his files and reads the pension documents from 2009. The moment of retirement is the moment when a man goes to the pension planning meeting and asks the pension advisor about his pension. The quality systems manager would diagnose this as a documentation gap in the process. The relevant information exists in the archived files, and the process does not have a step that retrieves the archived files at the point when they become relevant. And the absence of that step is a process failure that produced the outcome of the December 2021 retirement proceeding on incomplete information. The correct fix is to add the retrieval step. Before confirming the retirement figure, retrieve and review all pension-related documentation received in the preceding 20 years, specifically looking for provisions that apply to non-standard recipient situations. I have added this step to the process. The step was not available to me in November 2020. It is available to you now. The dispute. I want to describe the dispute with the specific accuracy it requires, because the dispute is the middle section of this story, and the middle section is where the lesson is. I wrote to the pension administrator in April 2022, citing the conversation I had with the pension advisor in November 2020, and the specific representation made about the CPI uprating. The administrator responded in June 2022, attaching a copy of the pension scheme document and highlighting the specific clause, paragraph 7.4, subsection C, International Recipients, that described the provisions I had been subject to. The clause was there. It was in the document I had been given in the pre-retirement information pack. I had read the information pack. I am a quality systems manager. I read documents. But I had not read paragraph 7.4 says, with the attention it deserved, because paragraph 7.4 says, was titled Special Provisions for Overseas Recipients, and I had not, in November 2020 when I was planning a retirement in Thailand, yet made the decision to live overseas, and I had read the document with the frame of a man who was planning to remain in Germany, which made paragraph 7.4 C's irrelevant, and the irrelevant sections of documents are the sections that do not receive sufficient attention and that sometimes turn out to be the sections that matter. I then engaged a German pension law specialist who reviewed the November 2020 meeting records. I had, as a quality systems manager, made notes of the meeting, which was useful, and who found that the pension advisor's statement about CPI uprating had been technically accurate for domestic recipients and had not been qualified to specify that it did not apply to overseas recipients. This was not false information. It was incomplete information. The distinction, in German pension law, does not create a right of redress in the way that false information would. The specialist advised that a complaint to the pension scheme's supervisory authority was possible but unlikely to produce the outcome I wanted. I filed the complaint. 14 months later, I received a determination that the pension scheme had operated within its rules and that the rules were the rules. What I want to give you now is what I did between March 2022 and the determination in May 2023, because the between is the actual content of the Hua Hin chapter, and the Hua Hin chapter is what I have been living and what I want to describe honestly. Let me give you what the dispute period cost in personal terms, because the cost was not only financial. My daughter Hannah is 39, lives in Hamburg, has 2 children I have met in Thailand once and see in Germany once a year, and is the person who retrieved the 2009 letter from the storage unit. She knows about the pension situation in the detail I have described. I did not manage the information carefully with her, the way I might have if the problem had been more embarrassing, because the problem was a document clause, and the management of a document clause dispute is within my professional skill set, and I was managing it professionally, and I did not find the situation embarrassing. I found it annoying, and I described it to Hannah as annoying, and she accepted that register and helped me find the 2009 letter and did not volunteer sympathy I had not asked for, which is the specific quality of my relationship with my daughter that I value most. She responds at the level at which I present the problem. The dispute period in Hua Hin was therefore a period in which I was dealing with a known problem on a known track, while living a life I had chosen on a parallel track, and the parallel track quality of it is genuinely how I experienced it, and I attribute this to the 38 years of running quality systems in which multiple problems operate in parallel, and the job is to manage each on its own track, without the tracks contaminating each other. What I want to give you now is what I did between March 2022 and the determination in May 2023, because the between is the actual content of the Hua Hin chapter, and the Hua Hin chapter is what I have been living and what I want to describe honestly. I was in Hua Hin. I was in dispute with a pension administrator. I was drawing on savings to cover the €400 monthly gap, and I was simultaneously building the life in Hua Hin that I had planned to build, because the life in Hua Hin was the correct life for a 65-year-old quality systems manager from Hamburg, and the dispute did not change that. And I had decided, in the specific way of a man who has spent 38 years resolving problems by separating the problem from the ongoing operation and addressing each on its own track, to run the dispute on one track and the life on the other track, and to not allow the dispute track to contaminate the life track. The life track, Hua Hin, is a town that suits a quality systems manager in the specific way I described when I chose it, which is to say, it suits a man who values precision and reliability and the absence of unnecessary drama. Let me give you the Hua Hin community I have found. Because the community is part of the life track, and the life track is the part of the story that will continue after the dispute track has ended. There are approximately 12 people I interact with any regularity in Hua Hin. They range widely in background. A retired Norwegian doctor, 2 British couples who came for the golf and stayed for the weather, a Swiss engineer who worked in petrochemicals and who I find immediately comprehensible because his professional formation is similar to mine, and a small number of long-term Thai residents who are part of the market and restaurant network that I have built across 2 years. The community does not have the density of the Pattaya or Chiang Mai expat communities, because Hua Hin does not attract the volume of new arrivals that those cities do, and the smaller community is an asset rather than a limitation. The people here have been here for reasons, and the reasons are the reasons of people who wanted a specific thing that Hua Hin provides. And the wanting of the specific thing produces a community that knows itself and that I find easier to inhabit than I imagine the larger communities would be. A man who has spent 38 years in a precision manufacturing environment where the processes are standardized and the people are professionals tends to find value in settings where the equivalent applies, and the Hua Hin expat community is, in this specific sense, a standardized setting. The people who are here because they understood what they were choosing and chose it. And the conversations produced by this kind of deliberate choosing are conversations I find both comfortable and informative. I go to the market on Saturday mornings. I go to the hospital for the quarterly checkup that a 67-year-old quality systems manager schedules as a process requirement rather than an emergency. I walk the beach on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, which are the mornings I have decided are walking mornings, in the specific way that a quality systems manager decides which processes run on which schedule and then runs them. The routine is good. The smaller life has a good routine. I want to give you a Tuesday morning specifically, because the Tuesday morning is where the smaller life is most fully itself. I wake at 6. The apartment in Hua Hin is on the second floor of a building 12 minutes from the beach, and at 6 in the morning the town is already awake in the way of Thai towns, which is to say it is fully operational but not yet at its daily peak, and the operational quality of it at 6 is the quality I prefer. I make coffee in the apartment. I check the weather, which is a habit from 38 years of quality management in which the external conditions affecting the production environment are monitored, and the weather in Hua Hin is almost always the same, warm, with the specific Gulf of Thailand humidity that one becomes accustomed to within 3 months of arrival, and that ceases to be a consideration after 6. But the checking is a habit, and habits persist. I walk to the beach. The beach at 7 in the morning in Hua Hin is the beach at its least performative. Thai residents exercising, a small number of expat walkers, the vendors setting up but not yet operational. The water, the specific color of the Gulf in the morning light before the sun is fully up. I walk for 40 minutes. I come back. I have a second coffee at the coffee place on the road between the beach and the apartment. The coffee place knows what I order. The knowing of what I order is the specific marker of residency that I have come to value as a quality indicator. When the institution knows the specification, the process is embedded, and the embedded process is the process that delivers consistent output. The Tuesday morning delivers consistent output. The consistent output is a good morning. The good morning is the smaller life. The smaller life is sufficient. Let me give you Dieter. Because Dieter is the most instructive person I have met in Hua Hin, and his situation deserves to be in the account. Dieter is a Swiss engineer, 68, who spent 32 years in the petrochemicals industry in Basel, and who has been in Hua Hin for 3 of the 4 years since he retired. He had his own pension complexity, 3 pension systems that were each designed without knowledge of the other 2. And when I told him about the paragraph 7.4 situation, he said, "The clause was in the document." I said, "Yes." He said, "You read the document." I said, "Yes." He said, "And you did not read that clause." I said, "It was not relevant at the time." He said, "I have 3 of those." I said, "What did you do?" He said, "I hired a German accountant in 2019 to read all 3 pension documents as if I were going to live in 3 different countries, and then I read the report." I said that was excellent preparation. He said, "It was expensive preparation." I said I would have paid for the report. He said he knew. We have coffee on alternate Tuesdays and the conversation is reliable. And the reliability is one of the specific good things about Hua Hin that does not appear in any expat publication, but that appears, reliably, every other Tuesday at 9 in the morning. And reliability is the thing I was built for, and it is what I have found, and it is sufficient. The life track. Hua Hin is a town that suits a quality systems manager in the specific way I described when I chose it. The hospital I registered at, Bangkok Hospital Hua Hin, operates with the specific efficiency that I found immediately comprehensible, because it is the efficiency of a professionally managed healthcare institution with standardized processes and clear documentation. The beach runs for a long distance in both directions, from the center of town, and it is maintained. The expat community, which I encountered gradually rather than immediately, has the character of a community of people who came here having thought about it rather than having arrived impulsively, and the having thought about it produces a register of conversation that I found comfortable. People who know why they are here, and who have been here long enough to know whether their reasons were correct. I have been here 2 years and a half. My reasons are correct. The smaller life has confirmed them. The dispute track ended in May 2023, with the determination I described. The determination was correct within its own terms. The pension scheme operated within its rules. The rules were the rules. The advisor gave me information that was accurate for the situation I was in at the time I received it, and that was not adjusted when my situation changed. I did not ask for the adjustment. I did not know to ask for the adjustment. The adjustment would have been available if I had asked the right question, which was, does this pension figure apply to a recipient living outside the EU? I did not ask this question in November 2020. I did not ask it because I had not yet decided to live outside the EU, and the question about a situation I had not entered did not occur to me as a question to ask. This is the specific failure of retirement planning that this story illustrates. The questions you need to ask about your pension are not always the questions that are obvious from the information you have been given, and the non-obvious questions are the questions that matter most, and the non-obvious questions require you to actively imagine scenarios you have not yet decided to enter. I did not imagine the Thailand scenario when I was in the pension planning meeting. I was imagining the Hamburg retirement scenario. By the time I imagined the Thailand scenario, the pension planning meeting was 16 months in the past. What I have now is the smaller life, and I want to describe the smaller life honestly because the description is part of the account. I want to be specific about what smaller means, because the word carries a valuation I want to be careful with. Smaller does not mean insufficient, it means smaller than planned, which is a different thing. The planned life had approximately €400 per month of discretionary resource above my essential costs. Travel to Germany once a year to see my daughter and my sister. The restaurant once a week instead of twice a month. The ability to contribute to the grandchildren's education funds that my daughter has set up and that I had planned to add to annually. The actual life has approximately none of those discretionary resources on a monthly basis. The €400 gap between planned and actual pension is approximately the same as the planned discretionary budget. So the actual pension funds the essentials, and the discretionary comes from the savings pool drawdown. The savings pool drawdown is not unlimited. When it reaches its limit, in approximately 5 years at the current rate, I will be 72, and my essential costs at 72 will be funded by the pension alone, and the pension alone, at its current real value, will cover the 18,000 baht apartment and the food and utilities and the hospital subscription and leave approximately 8,000 baht per month for everything else, which is approximately 200 euros at current rates, which is a number that requires a Hua Hin that continues to be as affordable as it is now, which I cannot guarantee and which I am watching. This is the 5-year calculation. I have made it. I continue to make it quarterly, as a quality systems manager continues to monitor a process whose parameters are known and whose performance requires tracking. What I have now is the smaller life, and I want to describe the smaller life honestly because the description is part of the account. The pension I receive is approximately 12% below what I planned for, 11% withholding, plus the CPI gap that has accumulated since 2021. Against the cost of living in Hua Hin, the pension is sufficient to cover my essential costs, the apartment at 18,000 baht per month, food, transport, utilities, and the Bangkok hospital subscription that I pay for healthcare access. What it does not cover is the buffer that I had planned for travel and for contingency and for the specific texture of a retirement that has discretionary resources rather than only essential ones. The discretionary resources come from the savings pool, which is reducing at a rate I can sustain for approximately a further 5 years at the current drawdown. In 5 years I will be 72, and the calculation of what the retirement looks like at 72, with a reduced savings pool and a pension that continues to lose real value as it is not uprated, is a calculation I have made, and that produces a number I can live on, and that does not produce the retirement I designed. The retirement I have is the smaller version of the retirement I designed, and the smaller version is available to me in Hua Hin, and I am living in it. I am going to end with the question I have been asked most often when I describe this situation to the small number of people I have described it to, which is, do you regret coming to Hua Hin? Before I give you the answer, I want to give you the specific questions I would add to any retirement planning conversation. Because the questions are the lesson, and the lesson is the reason for telling the story. The questions are, does my pension apply the same provisions to overseas recipients as to domestic recipients? If not, what are the specific differences, and what is the calculation? Does the pension uprate annually with the Consumer Price Index? And does this uprating apply if I live outside my home country? Is there a withholding tax on pension payments to recipients outside the EU or outside the country? And what is the rate? At what exchange rate is the pension paid? Is it the rate on payment date, or a fixed rate, or a hedged rate? And who bears the exchange rate risk? Are there other clauses in the pension scheme document that apply specifically to overseas recipients? And if so, what are they? These questions seem obvious once you have received a letter that made their answers relevant. They are not obvious before the letter. They require you to imagine yourself in the overseas recipient situation before you have entered it, which is the specific cognitive effort that pension planning meetings do not prompt. The pension planning meeting is designed for a man who will remain in the country. The man who will leave the country needs to ask additional questions. The questions are available. Ask them before you accept the projected pension figure as the actual pension figure. I am going to end with the question I have been asked most often when I describe this situation to the small number of people I have described it to, which is, do you regret coming to Hua Hin? The answer is no, and I want to be specific about why not. I do not regret coming to Hua Hin because the choice of Hua Hin was the correct choice based on the information I had, and the information I had was incomplete in one specific way, the pension clause. And incomplete information produces a less than optimal outcome, but does not produce a wrong decision. A decision made on incomplete information that would have been the same decision if the information had been complete is the correct decision. And I believe, examining the Hua Hin choice with the complete information I now have, that I would have made the same choice. I would have made it with smaller discretionary resources built into the plan, and I would have asked the pension administrator the specific question about overseas residency before retiring, and I would have entered the Hua Hin life with the accurate figure rather than the domestic figure, and the life I would have built would be the life I am building now, which is the smaller life, and the smaller life is a good life, and I am in Hua Hin, and the beach is the beach, and the hospital is the hospital, and the 38 years produced what they produced, and what they produced is sufficient. The Quality Systems Manager's assessment of the retirement is this. The design had a specification error. The specification error was identified after the process had begun, the process was adjusted to accommodate the error, and the adjusted process is producing an output that meets the revised specification. The revised specification is the smaller life. The smaller life is the correct output for the adjusted process. I am monitoring it quarterly. The monthly essential costs are within the pension income. The beach is within walking distance. The hospital operates with clear documentation. The Tuesday-Thursday walk schedule is maintained. The alternate Tuesday coffee with Dieter is maintained. The 38 years are behind me, and they were the correct 38 years. And I would do them again in the same company, with the same work in the same institution. And I would also hire a German accountant in 2019 to read the pension documents as if I were going to live in 3 different countries. And then I would read the report, and then I would come to Hua Hin, and I would be here. I would be here because Hua Hin is the correct place for a 67-year-old quality systems manager from Hamburg who needs warmth and reliability, and a hospital that keeps good records, and a community of people who knew what they were choosing and chose it, and who drink coffee on alternate Tuesdays and discuss the specific technical complexity of 3 overlapping pension systems, without complaint. I would be here because the beach is the beach, and the hospital is the hospital, and the market runs on a schedule, and the Tuesday-Thursday walk produces a quality of morning that 38 years of Hamburg winters did not produce, and that the pension clause cannot reduce, because the pension clause is a financial adjustment, and the morning walk on the Hua Hin beach is not financial. And the non-financial things are what the retirement was built for, and the non-financial things are what I have, and they are sufficient, and I am here, and the 38 years produced this, and this is enough, and the Quality Systems Manager has confirmed it, and the confirmation is filed.